Do you ever look around in your organization and think that you're surrounded by a bunch of liars? Well, some of my clients have, and there's been a lot of conversation around truth telling lately and the culture in our organizations and how not telling the truth, aka lying, is getting in the way of our organizations being successful. So I'm talking with Dominic Thurbon about truthful leadership, truth telling in our organizations, and what we need to do to bring back the candour. Welcome to Reimagining HR with Trina Sunday, the rule-breaking podcast where we challenge our thinking and our current people practices. This podcast is for time-poor HR teams and business leaders who are feeling the burn, lacking laughs, and not feeling the love. I'm Trina, your host, and I'm here to cut through the BS, explore different ways of thinking, and create high-impact HR functions. Because happier, healthier organisations are better for our people and our bottom line. So if you are keen to flip traditional HR on its head, hit the follow or subscribe button so you're the first to know when new episodes drop. I'm here to help and also to shake things up. So let's get started. Thanks for joining me. I'm joined by Dominic Thurbon today. He's got over 17 years of experience as a senior exec, a successful entrepreneur. He's internationally engaged as a speaker. He's writing. He's doing all the things that help leaders to do behaviour change in the face of disruption. He's now doing that through his business, Alchemy Labs. And he started his first company at 23. He's built and sold two of them, overachiever. One a professional services firm and the other an AI-enabled tech company. So he's going to teach me lots of things, I'm sure, at a later stage. He spent 5 years as a partner at EY and has authored and led research on bestsellers published in over 15 countries. And we're talking topics as diverse as generational and behavioural change. We're talking strategy, purpose-driven leadership, the future of work, all of that stuff that affects us in the work that we do in our organisations. He's got global clients and is about to release his next book next year, The Truthful Leader. And I'm really excited to talk to him about truth-telling in our organisation. So welcome, Dom. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Trina. It is a real treat to be here.
Let's talk about all those liars out there, shall we?
Great
kidding.
start. Let's do it.
Let's just talk about all the liars. But you've obviously seen a lot, right, in leadership, business, consulting, adulting, I'm sure. Tell us a little bit about you and your story and how truth kind of became a thing for you. Talk us through it. Set the scene for me.
As you mentioned, I started my business journey comparatively quite young, I think at 23. The true story, if we're going to do truth, is I was unemployed because I'd quit my job as a karaoke host to watch the World Cup and found myself at a sort of a loose end on the streets of King Street in Sydney early one morning. But a friend who then went on to be a colleague and collaborator who I worked with for many years, Peter Sheehan, and I started a business together working in the kind of generational change space. He was a social researcher. I had a political science research background, and we were helping companies attract, engage, and retain young staff. And then that grew into a kind of a behavioral change consultancy that looked at the broader questions of change and transformation. And so the science and the art of change, whether it be generational, sociological, organizational leadership, had been the middle of the bullseye from the very start of our first business, which was called Change Labs, later Carrickens Group. That was the professional services firm you mentioned. And so we would do work all around the world helping organizations do behavior change. We would also work in communities on behalf of organizations where we would go out and deliver programs in communities as part of their community investment for them. And an AI company spun out of that was looking at mental health and using AI tools to measure and monitor and intervene with the mental health of at-risk kids in school environments. But across all of that work, when we were dealing with these questions of why organizations transform, or more interestingly, why organizations fail to transform, the recurring pattern that over the course of the last 18 to 24 months just really began to capture my imagination was at the middle of so many of our problems with change, and therefore really our problems in achieving outcomes both organizationally and individually, because there's very few outcomes that don't require some level of change.
Yeah.
So many of the problems seemed to have at the heart of them the inability, or the unwillingness or inability of people to tell the truth. Over the course of writing the book, that's taken on a number of layers. When I refer to telling the truth, I mean telling the truth about a variety of different things in a variety of different ways. But it just became an obsession. And then I think, honestly, US electoral politics kind of sharpened the focus of mine on this crisis of honesty and this increasing absence, I think, from daily life of a norm and expectation that people's default position will be to tell the truth, and that there are repercussions for not telling the truth. It seems to be evaporating as a norm. And the more clients I was working with, the more I was like, man, if people can't fix this, we can't fix all the other stuff. It really is ground zero for achieving the things we care about. So yeah, from this career and background in change and transformation, I think the focus has sharpened in the last year and in the process of writing the book on this question of why don't people tell the truth? Why does that get in the way? And how can you make truth happen individually and organizationally?
So powerful because at the end of the day, right, trust underpins everything we're trying to do in organizations, and not being honest and not telling the truth erodes trust. But the reality is, right, lying seems to help a lot of people to become really successful. And we could draw on some political observations in that. But so what is it in there from the work that you've done? Like, if lying is making people be successful, how sustainable is that?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And it's often in these conversations the first question, which is like, whoa, 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 whoa. Isn't lying really successful?
Yeah, it works, man. It works. It's
Yeah.
like a strategy. Lie,
Yeah.
lie, lie, and you will
Yeah.
get what you want.
Yeah, we could just lie our way to greatness.
Yeah. Why don't we? Talk me through it.
Well, and the data certainly seems to suggest that plenty of people are, or at least are trying to. I mean, to frame that up quickly, and I know this isn't a direct answer to your question, but just to frame that up quickly as kind of ground zero, I do think you can empirically observe that it is not just a feeling we've got. It is true to say that lying, or at least the norm of telling the truth, seems to be evaporating. The ACCC, actually, this is quite cool data. The ACCC just did a study of social media influencers, and they found that 81% of their studied social media influencers would fall foul of like ACCC regulations around misleading communication. So,
Wow.
4 out of every 5 social media influencers are basically not meeting
Liars.
liars. Yeah. Or at least are not telling the truth adequately. But then, we've seen Vanguard cop a $13 million fine for making misleading claims about greenwashing. We've had Coles and Woolies before the ACCC being sued for misleading claims. We've got in the PolitiFact fact checking of the last presidential election found that between the candidates, less than 3% of statements in the last election were rated as fully true. 3%. About 30% were rated as out and out false. So the PolitiFact fact checking rates, this is so good. They rate the truthiness of statements on a scale of truth at one end to pants on fire at the other end, which is brilliant.
That's the best scale I've ever heard of.
Oh, yeah.
Where are you on a scale of like truth to pants on fire?
Yeah. And the answer was 19% of the statements were pants on fire. So one in 5 statements were pants on fire. And it leaves about half somewhere in the space of like, it's kind of true-ish. But you've got about half, either 49% either false or pants on fire. So it is, and we know from MIT data that lies tend to spread twice as quickly as true statements on social media, and they get shared about 5 times more frequently.
Why is that?
It's a very good question. I think it's to do generally with the framing of it. I think there's a bit of correlation here in that statements that are untrue are generally also being shared with quite a lot of emotional content, like they're triggering anger or annoyance or frustration that are very good at getting people
engaged. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So weirdly, the algorithm because it optimizes for engagement, it optimizes for emotional content, which means it optimizes by corollary for untrue stuff, which is usually problematic. But so to your initial question, I do think there are a lot of people and organizations effectively trying to lie their way to success. And it's worth noting that the person who scored 3% of true statements in the last election won. So it is tempting to reach the conclusion that lying is really effective. And I think there is a way of looking at the world where that can seem like it's true, but I would argue that That's a kind of a too narrow a view of what we mean by successful and certainly what we should care about. But I don't want to just rant on about it.
Tell me more.
Okay.
Tell me more around kind of if you're lying your way to success, and this, I guess, is probably at the core of the sustainability thing. It's kind of, surely that's only going to get you so far. Like, what does the evidence tell us about how long-term or how broad, the success can look like if you've lied your way there?
Yeah. The wonderfully framed question. If anyone's watching the video version of this, you'll see me frantically nodding away in the background. So the way that I think we put it in the research is lying can seem effective provided you look at a short enough time scale and a narrow enough criteria for what you mean by successful.
Okay.
To use a really practical example, take the last US political election. Now, this is not a political point. So this is not a partisan point. These are just reciting the facts. So it's tempting to go, the winning candidate lied a lot and won, so it was successful. And so if your definition of success is getting someone elected, sure, in that case, lying correlated. But if you then go, how did that go for the next 3 months since inauguration? A global economy tanking, a share market having record falls, hundreds, if not thousands of people being illegally deported to offshore prisons, a complete breakdown in kind of federal and state institutions. Oh, and by the way, a whole bunch of the people who were lied to now being economically worse off, even though they thought they were going to be better off. All of a sudden, it doesn't look quite as successful. And so I think the way we put it is you have to be very careful not to confuse something being locally successful. Lying worked to get me promoted because I lied on my CV. Lying worked to get me elected, with something being globally successful. I was then good at that thing. The thing then worked. So to use the CV example, lying can be effective to get you into a position, but you can't lie your way to being good at it.
Yeah.
So in the one sentence pithy way I would say it is that any system or process that is built on lies is completely unsustainable. Sooner or later, the truth just catches up. Sometimes it can take a frustratingly long time for that to happen, and it can be pretty painful, but sooner or later, the truth catches up. And so, yes, I can see why in certain circumstances, some people might fear, and lots of people lie. Clearly, well, all of us lie.
What? On video? I'm like recoiling in horror. What do you mean? Did you just call me a liar?
Sorry, let me rephrase that. Everyone else lies.
Except for you, no, not true.
Well, neither of us would lie. Yeah.
No, never. But there's a scale for this, right? And you used the word truthiness, I think it was earlier. And I'm like, I want to lean into that because it's kind of, especially I'm ex-marketing as well. And then I'm in the business of selling behavior change. We have a similar business, but we approach it from very different perspectives. But it's kind of, you're selling an idea. You're trying to get people on board. You're trying to tap into the what's in it for me. Where is the scale of like spin, for example, or embellishment through to like lie, pants on fire, you're just an outright crook? Like, what does that look like when you talk about truth telling? How do you frame that?
I'll put a link in the show notes to an article specifically about this. So you're right. I'm also a salesperson, and I know you and I both have businesses to run and we both sell products. And obviously it's a hard case in the academic sense. Like people would go, yeah, but surely the truth works everywhere except sales. So here's how I think of the scale of truthiness. This is the Dom Thurbon slippery scale of truthiness.
I'm here for it.
Working from most true to least true, it goes truth, then it goes positioning, then it goes spin, then it goes lies. And I think you have this kind of 4-category analog scale where you have this gray middle of a version of the truth that preserves all the things we know are true, but might hold a few things back, but for reasons that are in the interests of the listener. So it might be for brevity. It might be the way we teach science to younger kids, where we knowingly teach simplified and inaccurate versions of things because it preserves all the things that are true, but it's a much simpler way of understanding it. And it's done in service of the audience. I would call that positioning. if you're selectively editing, holding back details, you're not lying, but you are not being complete with the truth, or you're emphasizing things in certain ways to knowingly lead people to a conclusion that is in opposition with the facts.
Mm-hmm.
I would call that spin. So that's like, I'm not preserving the truth and I'm hoping that you don't get to the truth either. That's spin. And if you're just outright making stuff up, that's lying. And so I actually think there is quite a lot of space in the middle for salespeople to selectively emphasize things, provided they still do their best to work in service of the person that they're selling to. So like, I will never sell something that I don't think is in the interest of the person buying it. I simply won't.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
And a lot of great salespeople share that trait, right? Like they know that one of the most powerful tools in sales, we always used to say when we were teaching consultants to sell, our golden rule was first things first, give good advice, right? Just make that your ground zero thing. Give good advice. And if you give good advice, firstly, clients will love you for it. And secondly, it will give you which side of the truth spectrum you need to fall on, right? Like if you're just going to give good advice, you will find yourself gravitating towards that. And in my experience, buyers love it because they feel like people know when they're being taken for a ride.
Yeah.
And then you get the downstream problem, right? Of that, even if the spin is successful locally in helping you make a sale, as soon as you develop a reputation for being someone who's full of shit, as soon as you sell people a lemon, if it's a consulting service, as soon as you then have to deliver on what you've sold, you're digging your own grave. So I think I totally understand that like radical candor, where all you do is tell the full unabridged truth with no tact, is like right out at one end of the spectrum. And there is a book called Radical Candor that's...
Is it Kim Scott?
Yeah, I believe it is Kim Scott. Yeah.
Is it?
I thought so. That name's very familiar.
Anyway, I could have that wrong. I'll correct myself in the show notes. But it is a book and a concept I've looked at because I've had people talk to me about brutal candor and radical candor. And I've had some like self-reflection around, my God, what is this? And for me, though, I think it's been an interesting reflection because what makes it radical to some people is because they are so far from truth-telling that they find straight talk really different, or maybe they're surrounded by people that do not talk straight with them. And I'm known for being a straight shooter. It's part of what's in my brand. It's the feedback that comes through on every bloody feedback form. You know, Trent's such a straight shooter. I know where I stand. But it's because to your point, I think it's probably positioning in terms of how you break it down. But I think what flips it from positioning to spin as well is intent. And so I think to your point, if the intent is to help, and this is where when I have consultants that are asking me, how do you do it though? The sales bit's a bit icky. And I'm like, well, only if you're thinking about it as sales. I just have conversations with people and share with them how I think I can help them.
Yeah.
And
100%.
if that is sales to you, well, you do you, boo. But like, I'm just like, hey, here's what I do. Here's the problem I hear you have. Here's where I think I can help. Like, if you want it, you want it. If you don't, you don't, and you move on. But spinning it is something that then when you have to deliver, your reputation, as you say, once that's global and you broaden that audience and you broaden kind of the impact that it has, you're going to come unstuck, right?
Yeah.
But I think candor is also a bad thing, right? It's how we evolve, it's how we improve, it's how we innovate. But at the core of it is the definition is about being honest and telling the truth, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I agree very much with the way you invoke intent as being a core part of that. I think on the candor point, the other side of it that I think it's important to invoke, because there's no doubt, and I know given the incredible work you do with HR professionals and CEOs and senior leaders, I would be willing to place a very large monetary bet that you will have had this experience as well, which is I've definitely met leaders where I'm a straight talker is their excuse for being a dickhead, where you sit at the other side of a client, like I know we would have done this in a coaching situation where they're like, yeah, but I'm just telling it straight. And it's like, yeah, you're also being a knob.
Yeah.
Because I think the other side is stylistic, right? Which is finding the way to be a straight talker in ways that preserves the emotional experience of the people around you, especially when there's positional hierarchy involved. When you know walking into the room as a senior person, your words carry you can not just ruin someone's day, you can completely destroy someone psychologically by
Yep.
stylistically delivering truth badly.
Mm.
Did you ever watch Buffy, the Vampire Slayer?
Yes, I did, everyone. Yes, I did.
Hell yeah. So the character Cordelia has one of my favorite quotes where someone says that wasn't very tactful. And she says, tact is when you just don't say true stuff, which I love as a quote, but it's like, yeah, tact is actually not, I hate to call bullshit on Cordelia, but tact is not just saying true stuff. Tact is finding the right time, place, and style to deliver truth in the way that it has the most constructive impact. You can be unconstructive in two ways, right? I know I'm truly on your turf here, not mine, but you can be unconstructive in two ways. You can either have the complete absence of truth and just gild the lily and not have the hard conversation, or you can swing the pendulum right through having the hard conversation to having like the abrasive conversation or the rude conversation that is done unconstructively. And I think there is a stylistic skill set in being able to, this is going to sound like a really self-serving story, but I had an environment just towards the end of my time at EY where I had to make a couple of people redundant. And I think it was genuinely one of the proudest moments of my career when I got an email from someone who'd just been made redundant the day after before they like cleared their stuff out and left to just say, hey, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I've never felt so supported in a hard conversation in my life. And I just wanted to thank you for the way that was done. And I was literally telling this guy to like clear out his desk.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
that is everything.
Yeah.
Like that is everything, because that's holding the human at the core of it, right? And you can tell the truth, but you don't have to rip people apart. And that's where the word brutal, like if someone calls it brutal Candour,
yeah,
well, that's problematic, right? Because brutality is not a cool thing. I've never heard anyone talk about anything being brutal being like awesome. And that's the part that's the problem. It's not the candour, it's the brutality of how it's delivered, to your point around stylistically.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of truth-telling without emotional intelligence, right? Like we've got a responsibility to tell the truth, but responsibly.
Yeah, 100%.
What is truthful leadership to you then? Like, and why does that matter more than ever? Like, talk me through what truthful leadership looks like.
It's a wonderful question. And I would love, as someone literally writing a book called The Truthful Leader, to have like a really good, pithy one-sentence answer to this. But unfortunately, that particular middle of the bullseye is still evolving up between here and print. But definitely, yeah, unfortunately, I only have a slightly longer answer rather than a short answer to that.
And that's okay. That's why we got to buy the book.
Yeah. I could tell you the answer, but unfortunately, you have to buy the book. So to me, the truthful leader is a person who places a high enough premium on the truth, not just the truth as the endpoint, but the truth as the process of the truth, seeking the facts, doing their best to understand what's really going on, seeking independent, all the things you have to do to arrive at the truth. So not just the truth as an outcome, but the truth as a process of arriving at it as well. A leader who places a high enough premium on the truth as both a process and an outcome that they're able to have all of their daily interactions, from the conversations they have to the decisions that they make to the systems and the processes that they implement to the way they work with clients, to have all of their daily actions preserve what we know to be true, right? And so I think of the truth on three levels, right? So truth about ourselves, and in particular, truth about the impact that we have on the people around us. And by self here, I mean ourselves as a person and ourselves as a business. So truth about ourselves, the impact that we have on the world around us. Truth about what I would call our sector. Like, so in enterprise sense, that's like the business that we're in and the impact that we as an industry, as a sector have on the world. And then truths about systems, right? So at the level of the way our society functions, the way our business as a system functions, truth. So on this kind of spectrum, from the very most personal thing of like, wow, I think I just had a really bad impact on someone with the conversation I had with them, or geez, I think I don't know what I'm doing, or that sort of truth, all the way through to, man, is it possible that the configuration of a business system being optimized purely to give profit and nothing else might be creating impacts downstream that are not optimal.
Yeah.
And so Truthful Leader is the leader who is able to, in all their daily actions, preserve what we know to be true about all of those things.
And it can be massive. It's one of these things where it's a principle. If you show up to everything you do with truth being at the core, then you're generally going to come out better than someone that's, lie, pants on fire. For, at that scale, that's the best thing ever. What is it that holds people, and I guess organizations, to your point about systems, back from being honest? Like, obviously, we talked about the fact that lying can get you some success, but in the short term, locally, in a more insular way, and then as things get traction, it kind of unravels a bit. But what is stopping people from being truthful?
There's really good research on this. And I think that I'm looking to expand some of that out in some novel ways with the research I'm doing for the book as well. But I would say generally the reasons people aren't truthful, or the things that get in the way, fall into kind of three categories. Number one, self-interest, without a shadow of a doubt. And I'm really loath to label it as selfishness or greed, because the truth is that biologically and evolutionarily, there is a very, very strong self-interest drive that people can't escape. Survival, yeah. And so without a doubt, the number one reason people lie is because it's in their self-interest. In fact, there was a great University of Massachusetts thing that found the single most common reason people lie on a day-to-day basis is to avoid other people. So that's like yeah.
Yes.
Totally right. That's like, oh, sorry, I've got something on.
I don't want to see you yet. Yeah. I'm totally busy that day. I haven't told you what day it is. Oh, shit. Right.
Yeah. Oh, when is that again? No. Yeah. Busy.
Yep. Still busy. Yep.
Yeah. Interestingly, by the way, that research, the second most common reason people said that they lied was for the purposes of practical jokes. And I'm like, that's not a lie. And that's not in the spirit of this thing.
Oh.
Yeah. So the number one reason was that. And I would say that's a really good, safe illustration of self-interest. It's like, I actually don't want to go out tonight. I'm lying for my own benefit. And obviously you get, fudging on CVs, lying to win an election, CEOs lying because they think it will improve their position and standing with the board.
Yeah.
So definitely because it's in our self-interest. I think the second reason people lie, though, is the complete opposite, which is the genuine belief that it's in the interests of other people. So people, for instance, in a performance setting, feeling like, man, if I really gave my honest feedback on this, it's really going to upset or hurt this person. And so I'm going to white lie, or I'm going to temper my feedback, what they might characterize as a lie of service. And we could talk for hours about that, because I think the very, very clear sort of analysis of that would show that it is almost never in the interests of someone to lie to them.
It is a disservice, 100% disservice, and it's unkind, because you are essentially continuing someone being set up to fail.
Yeah.
And no one feels good when that is what is happening in their workplace.
Yeah.
It does not feel good. You are not helping someone to be thriving and smashing it by not giving them the feedback that they need to make adjustments to be doing great work. It's just not cool.
Yeah, definitely. And ironically, to that point, I think the middle one, because there's three of these things. So this middle one of lying out of a perceived being of service to other people, I think it's best viewed as a capability gap. I would stop saying, I think it's in the interests of this person for me to lie to them, and start saying, I don't have the skills to deliver this true thing in a way that is good for them. Because you can fix that, right? You can just learn the words.
100%.
Learn a really simple sentence you can use every time. Like, I'm really aware that this feedback might be hard to hear, and it's absolutely not my intention to upset you, but I think it's really important for you to hear it. My feedback is this. You have at that point fully discharged your obligations to be responsible for someone else's feelings.
Yeah.
And then you get all that coaching around, like, it's actually okay. It's not a sign that you've done the wrong thing if someone is upset by feedback. It's a cue to analyze, But sometimes feedback is upsetting, and that's just a normal part of the processing response, and they'll thank you for it later. So number one, out of self-interest. Number two, they lie out of kind of this delusion that it's in the interest of other people. And then number three is quite simple, which is fear. They're worried about the implications that the truth might have. And you see this in a lot of organizations where there's not a requisite level of psychological safety in order to do it. Actually, a really quick story about that. I can't remember if you and I have talked offline about this before, so this will either blow your mind or you will have heard this before, but it will be so familiar to your work trainer. I was delivering a 2-day workshop for the top 60 leaders at a big utilities company, and the 7 senior execs were in the room, but so were the next 53 people. And over the course of the day, as they often do, in the briefings, the really senior people were like, just so you know, coming into this, our second level, we have a lot of problems with people speaking up, it's often the executive speaking. And obviously I've got a talk track for that in my head because I'm like, I've never met a group where you just happen to have 53 introverts. If no one's willing to talk up, maybe there's something going on. But anyway, they were like, they're not going to talk up much. And so this became a theme of the conversation. And then finally on the second day, a person at the second level of leadership, she takes the mic. She's like, there's been a lot of talk over the last 2 days about getting us to speak up. I guess I've just been sitting here wanting to find a way to say that me speaking up has been coming at tremendous personal cost, because last time I spoke up in this group, 2 people literally called me a bitch. Now, it killed me that I looked across the room at one of the senior executives and they were on their phone during this part of the thing, which made me lose my frickin' mind. But I was like, that's such a beautiful articulation of a culture where the senior execs were like, but we want our people to speak up. We want them to tell the truth. And then people are literally saying, yeah, but I'm really scared of the consequences if I do. And so I do think the way that we align incentives, the way that we align cultures can really push people one way or the other towards or away from saying difficult, true things. And so between those 3 things are kind of the lens of self-interest, the lens of being in service of others, and this lens of the fear that can be attached to, but if I say the true thing, what about X, Y, Z? Explains, I think, the overwhelming majority of the daily struggle with the truth that most people have.
And it's most behavior responses typically though as well, isn't it? It's always situational, but it's that fear and that response where you are behaving in a way to meet an insecurity need as opposed to being confident and strong enough, standing in your own truth and to give less fucks really, to be able to go, yeah, no, this is who I am and this is because I truly intrinsically believe X. So in a constructive culture, you would, be able to share that. But if consequences and the retribution that comes from truth telling is such that there is a consequence that's too much, people are trading that off every blessed day, right?
Yeah.
If I go this far, it's not like everyone's choosing to turn up as a liar, but it feels like every interaction we have in an organization is a risk assessment around what's this going to cost me today.
It's so beautifully said.
And I think truth telling is a really big part of that. And the fear stuff really strikes because of the culture work I do, and you're in behavior change. So you would get that as well. And I'm reflecting kind of how do we create the kind of culture where people feel safe to tell the truth? And that's a whole thing, right? There's a complexity to that. And you talked about systems. You talked about the players using those systems. You talked about the individuals driving their own kind of thing. But especially in HR, it's kind of like, what's the toolkit for truth telling inside our organizations that's, and I think I read something that you'd written where it's like, it starts with asking better questions. And I don't know if you want to expand on what are your thoughts, right? How do we create that space and how do we give people the tools to be more truthful?
Yeah. By the way, that line you just used of it feels like every conversation is a risk assessment is such a wonderful line. I love that. Putting that in my kit bag to quote you on at some later date. Yeah, it is both the most important question and the hardest one, of course, because it is the change question. And I think one of the reasons it's particularly hard is because of the broader context of we're just seeming to be living in a world where there's just less. I think Sam Harris said it beautifully, where He said, I've quoted this at the start of an article somewhere. He basically said, now, like, the problem is we now seem to live in a world where lying about the most important things at the largest scale is completely free of consequence. And I will say it's extremely hard for individuals and teams and businesses to unilaterally decide that we will be an oasis where truth matters in a world that increasingly doesn't give a shit. And so there is a certain, and I will lean into this in the Truthful Leader, even though I'm conscious that it makes me in the category of like old man shouts at cloud. There is we have to move on this as a society level of this conversation where we need to make truth matter again. And there's going to be a lot of big levers we need to pull. And one of them is going to have to be the way we regulate social media. And I do see social media as playing a causative role in this, the way that we've allowed advertising supported business models to optimize algorithms to care about nothing other than amplifying what gets shared when we know that that will be bad for people. And the only reason we're worried about moving is this kind of neoliberal, but like that'll mean big tech companies make less money. It's like, yeah, they fucking will, but no one gave them the right to make as much money as humanly possible, regardless of the effect it has on people. And it is playing a causative role in the breakdown of our relationship to truth. So all that just by way of saying, like, totally get that it's hard. However, at the level of the business and the HR team and the toolkit, I think there's a couple of things. So number one, without a shadow of a doubt, I think we need to, with tact, respect, and positive intent, hold people to account for when they don't tell the truth. So I think we need to all take a big old swig of courage and put on our big girl pants and be a bit like, when we observe people just lying, actually call people on it. And I think that is a responsibility we can take at an individual level for being just that little bit that pushes back against the tidal wave going the other way. And if enough people do that, I think it will be meaningful. And that is really little things, right? Like, so I, for instance, don't share anything on social media anymore without checking first. I saw a really, really cool headline from a friend of mine the other day that was like, oh my God, it turns out AI works better when you're polite to it. And my first instinct was, oh my God, that's such a cool finding. How about that? And I was about to share and I was like, let me check this. Turns out that's not what the evidence says at all.
Right.
Right. And so.
Good to know. Let me write that down. Be mean to AI because it makes no difference. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Quote Dom Thurbon, be rude to AI. And so this is why it's hard, right? Because that takes 5 minutes instead of that taking 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But I do think us just developing these little habits of falling in love, not with cynicism, but with skepticism, and just be like, it's totally okay to, when someone tells you something, to be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, where did that come from? What's the source for that? And be super, super curious, but actually to place a premium ourselves as individuals on attempting to find the truth of something. So I think one, we can all just do our best to hold people to account. I think number two is, particularly because so much lack of truth happens because of that capability gap of people don't have the right words, I think we need to train people into how to have honest, hard conversations.
Yeah.
And I know this is something where you do a lot of amazing work about like this kind of literally how do you have the direct, the honest, the straight shooter conversation. It's much more your bag than mine. But I do think there's something in that. The third thing I think we can do at the level of the business, and I really recommend businesses do, is they look at the way their KPIs and incentives are set out and ask themselves the question, are we incentivizing people to be dishonest? The way that we set targets, the way that we build people's KPIs, the way that we manage people, are we creating an environment where there is a positive incentive to be dishonest? And that would almost certainly be inadvertent because no one's going to have a lying KPI. But are we inadvertently creating that?
Could we? There could be something in that.
No such thing as a bad idea. Yeah.
I'm going to be curious and lean into that later. Like, should we have an anti-lying KPI? Anyway, sorry, continue.
You know what? The more you said that, the more I'm like, I like that idea. I do think those are roughly the three kind of personal accountability for being curious and asking the question, giving people skills to make sure that capability isn't an excuse. And then thirdly, doing a really good audit of is the way we're setting up incentives, encouraging people to lie. Like I worked for EY for 5 years, right? EY is an incredible organization when it comes to having systems in place to make sure that bullshit doesn't make it through to clients, and it's an audit firm, like genuinely extraordinary. But inside the organization, it's interesting. One of the challenges you always have in a big accounting firm is you have all these systems for people to account for time. And then we put a dollar value on everyone's time. And then we wonder why everyone's timesheets are inaccurate. And it's because every time they bill $1 to a code, their manager's margin looks bad. And it's like, you're just incentivizing people to, that never reaches the client, by the way. This is an internal issue that just makes it really hard to accurately account for time. And it's like, because your incentives are set up to encourage people to not tell the truth on their timesheets.
Yeah. It's the incentive for the activity over the outcome, right?
100%. Yeah.
And I think that the lying is then a byproduct of where outcomes can not be landing. And especially when we look at them more globally, as you described earlier, rather than locally. I could talk about this all day, I think. I'm very conscious of listener time, and we may have to have a part 2 depending on what chat comes back from my listeners. But I'm curious as we close it out, Dom, what does reimagining HR look like to you?
My number one master belief from all of my transformation work is that organizations don't change, people do. I think that might have been Pete Feuder's line originally. It's very much one I've adopted as my mantra, and it's held up in all the work I've done, that organizations don't change, people do. And particularly in the face of the AI transformation we're seeing, where the data would suggest that the organizations getting the most value out of AI are spending twice as much on the people as they are on the technology, would really reinforce the point that change is a human journey. And so my reimagining of HR is, I think the greatest disservice that HR has ever done to itself is inadvertently allow so many parts of the business to think of them as a compliance function. And that crept up, I think, on HR as a discipline. And now it's really unfair that there are so many line of business leaders who see HR as some sort of compliance function. My reimagining of HR is this should be the single most important part of a business in driving the transformation that's required over the next 10 years to reinvent business. That would be the reimagining. I think it should be the single biggest force for transformative change inside the business. I think it's a big statement. That's going to have a lot of implications.
Massive. Love it. Game on.
But I think that's it. And I think we need it because more than 40% of CEOs say that their business will cease to exist if it doesn't radically transform within the next 10 years. And so I think it's got to be the people part of the business that takes up the mantle and says, we will become the most energetic leaders in the firm to make that happen. I think it's an identity level shift and a shift to what it should be. That's my thought.
Imagine that. Truth talk. I love it. Thank you so much, Dom.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in and leaning in to this week's episode as we look to reimagine how we show up for our people, organisations and community. Reach out to us via our website at reimaginehr.com.au with your HR horror stories or suggestions of people you'd love to hear from or topics you want to explore. It's all about people, purpose and impact, and we are here for all of it. Until next time, take care, team.